Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live. Let me tell you, the dopamine, it's flowing.
I am damn excited. Damn excited.
We are so excited to be joining you guys tonight.
Oh! Well, how you doing, man? Patrick.
Will, Sterling.
Yeah.
Super Bowl champion, two-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
And he picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna score!
And we'll see you next week. But until then, as always, go Chiefs.
Welcome. This is Freaky Friday on the Arrowhead Addict channel. I'm Adam Best, joined by, of course, the golden voice of Sterling Holmes and producer extraordinaire Richard, behind the scenes, making us look good. I feel like we're now in summer vacation season, but this is a Friday podcast. So we are going to, if you're getting on a plane, download us, right? If you're getting on a train, download us. If you're getting in a car, stream us. We're golf cart friendly. All my people in Missouri, I know you got boats. We are boat friendly. We are a weekend show, and listen, you don't have to be here live, but if you are here live with Sterling and I right now, we thank you for that. We're gonna have a lot of fun. Sterling, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. It's a busy weekend. I do a thing called the Big Slick each week or each year. So my mom's the auctioneer. I help her out with that, and it's with all these celebrities. They come to Kansas City, and it's for a great cause for Children's Mercy Hospital. They raise tons of money every single year. It's with Paul Rudd, Jason Sudeikis, Rob Riggle, Heidi Gardner joined in, Eric Stone Street, David Koechner. Those are the local KC ties, and they bring in their friends from LA and all over, wherever they're at, every single year. This year, some of the bigger names like Johnny Knoxville coming back from Jackass back in the day. Kenan Thompson, right? Kenan Thompson from SNL. First year he's joining. Last year was Sheryl Crow, which was really, really cool. Daughtry coming back this year. He has a great voice live, like insanely talented voice, Chris Daughtry. So every year, it's really cool. It's for a great cause. Raise a ton of money, but I helped my mom out with that. Was at the Chiefs Ambassadors auction actually last night, helping the auction out. My mom and myself again last night. A lot of fun. Talked with Mitch Holtis for a while. He loves when I do my Jim Rome impersonation on radio. And I'm trying to convince him to do a swap with the Royals announcers. So he would call a Royals games, and then like Denny Matthews would call a Chiefs game. And he said, I'm all in. That sounds awesome. So wow. I'm trying to convince some people on the Royals side to let that transpire and happen. So we'll see what we can do. But I want Mitch Holtis to call a Royals game. Come on. Bobby Witt Jr. tasting the sweet nectar of home plate.
He can call anything. I mean, he can read the ingredients on a shampoo bottle, and I'm in. Question for you about Johnny Knoxville. Can you guys auction off something where Johnny Knoxville will find a new way, a new creative, entertaining way for you to injure yourself? I might be in on that.
He might be old now. I think he's older now. He's calmed down a little bit.
He does have the gray, looking distinguished though, a different, like, you know, a more refined Johnny Knoxville.
Shockingly aged well for the amount of injuries he put himself through.
No kidding. Like, I guess the guy just has an incredibly high pain threshold, which is what we also hope our Chiefs have in 2025, because, you know, last year the offense was riddled with injuries to some extent. So we are going to talk today about X factors for the 2025 season. I think we tend, especially this time of year, to have a little bit of tunnel vision. You know, I can't have one more discussion about Travis Kelce's physical shape or his weight. I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. I mean, we are just too bored and nay. We are too prone to gossip. Also, Josh Simmons, Rashee Rice, the kind of like injury rehab, you know, it's 24/7 coverage on this stuff. So what we want to do today is we want to look at some X factors, some underrated storylines that are going to be very important to the 2025 season and are being a little bit overlooked. You ready to dive in here?
I can't wait.
Let's start with both of our favorites, actually, and that is defensive backs coach Dave Merritt. running through some of the challenge that's on Dave Merritt's plate. This will be the first season of the Mahomes era where the Chiefs don't have a highly paid veteran safety serving as the ringleader of the secondary. Of course, we had Eric Berry to start off the Mahomes era, then brought in Tyrann Mathieu to deliver that championship swagger. Justin Reid was the elder statesman the past 3 years, but they decided, I kind of thought they would bring in a veteran safety, even if it was a little bit. I know they brought in Mike Edwards, but that's not really what I'm talking about here. Were you surprised that they didn't bring that person in?
No, because Mike Edwards was a guy I thought. Remember, I said they should bring in a Mike Edwards type, and then they brought in Mike Edwards. That's more or less what I expected. And we had talked about this. They like having veteran safeties, whether it was Dan Sorensen or Eric Berry or Tyrann Mathieu or Justin Reid. We always laugh and say they don't pay safeties. No, they do. They just don't pay to keep them in Kansas City, at least second contracts. They'll pay for one, not two. And it has to be a new guy for some reason. It can't be a guy in-house. I don't know why they do that, but it's the way they've rolled traditionally outside of Eric Berry. So I guess Dan Sorensen, but that wasn't a large contract. So that's, again, a little different. I know I'm throwing a lot of caveats, but still, I think the point remains. I like the safety group for the most part because I think, yeah, I know we're going to talk about it, but Jaden Hicks, like I think he is poised to take that next step. Brian Cook, bummer because of the injuries. Somewhat is what he is. We'll talk more about that as well. But no, overall, I'm not super surprised that they didn't go out and bring in a more highly paid, highly touted safety because I think they do like what's in the room.
The DiCaprio rule comes into play here. If you're 26 and you're a safety, Veach wants you. If you're 29, no mas, right? And the thing about 29 at safety is if you're a corner and you lose a step, you're probably fine. Maybe they can move you in the slot. Maybe they can move you to safety. If you're a safety and you lose a step, and I think we have seen it happen with Eric Berry. We've seen it happen a little bit with Justin Reid. I thought he struggled last year in coverage at times, even though he had, I think, a really good season in a lot of regards, especially against the run. And even Tyrann Mathieu, even though he's kind of had a resurgence in New Orleans, they seem to lose a step. So I think they're just betting against the age curve. And that kind of leads me to Jaden Hicks. And can Jaden Hicks be the next day 3 project turned stud? Now, day 3, I don't think he was really a day 3 NFL draft player. Dane Brugler, Daniel Jeremiah, the draft industrial complex didn't think that either. For some reason, the league was a little lower on him, and he slipped to the 4th round, I think the 133rd pick. But he had 288 rookie reps in coverage last year. I thought he was arguably the Chiefs' best safety in coverage last year. I'm not going to say he's the best safety overall. He didn't play enough snaps, but I thought he was really good against the run. He graded out really well. The thing that I think is the next evolution for him is being a leader in that room, kind of being the vocal leader that Justin Reid was, that Tyrann Mathieu was. And then also the intricacies of being a Spags blitzer and kind of disguising yourself. And so opposing offenses don't really know what you're doing. I think Justin Reid and Tyrann Mathieu were really good at that. We're really good at kind of camouflaging into the defense and keeping quarterbacks guessing. That's a trait, that's a skill that Jaden Hicks is going to have to pick up. How are you feeling about the sophomore season for Jaden Hicks?
Yeah, I'm really excited. Again, when he was drafted, I think the writing was somewhat on the wall for Justin Reid. This was the Justin Reid replacement. And you're right. I thought he looked really good in coverage last year. Yeah, he's not quite the downhill hitter that Justin Reid is. But the coverage, you can see glimpses that probably going to eventually be better than Justin Reid in that situation, right? So a little different style of player than Justin Reid. But again, a little bit of a, yeah, he was going to be as long as he looked good, Justin Reid was in his last year. That's more or less what it was. So that means he looked good. The Chiefs trust him. They walked on Reid. And that, again, that means they have a lot of faith in Jaden Hicks. And I think we should have a lot of faith in Jaden Hicks. Again, could it be a Shamari Conner situation? Which, again, I know it's one of the things we're going to get to in a second. Could be, where he takes a step back. Very possible. I'm not betting on that, though. I think this is one of, and maybe I'm wrong because we start with Brian Cook. We kind of saw it with Juan Thornhill, where it was like, are they
injuries, though? Injuries, right?
And those are injuries. So I do think Jaden Hicks is a guy that takes a step forward, and he is a major cog, a focal point, and a guy that Chiefs trust in that safety room?
New Orleans, where Chiefs safeties go to die. Actually, where all Chiefs defenders go to kind of like phase themselves.
Wait. Tyrann Mathieu was pretty darn good the past couple. Tyrann Mathieu's been pretty good. He's
been incredible in New Orleans. He's been actually much better in New Orleans the last several years than he was his last year in Kansas City. But they do have the main point here is they have a type, and it is Chiefs castoffs, right? They've never met a Chiefs castoff that they didn't like down there in New Orleans. So Shamari Conner, you mentioned him. We were both super high on Shamari Conner as a rookie, had a lot of flashes in coverage, but then they kind of moved him to the nickel a lot last year. And I just don't think he has the foot speed to play that position. So my question to you here is, can Merritt resuscitate Shamari Conner after a down year that I think was partially due to maybe a bigger role could explain some of it, but I think he played out of position. Can he have a comeback year?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. I think Chiefs fans wanted him to be L'Jarius Sneed, and my pushback was always he's not fast enough. L'Jarius had elite quickness and athleticism. Shamari Conner didn't. And so when people say, well, he's a cornerback safety hybrid, I'm like, yeah, but I think in the NFL, at least, that's more of a safety just based on the speed. It's not quite Kendall Fuller, but I think if Trent McDuff, again, I know we're going to get to this too, if Trent McDuff can play more in the slot, that alleviates the concerns of almost having to force Shamari to play in the slot. It's not all Shamari's fault. I think that it was necessity more than anything else, which is why he played there. PFF would agree. The eye test would agree. His rookie year was much more productive than year two. Year one, they moved him all around. I looked it up on PFF where he was lining up. It was all over. I mean, it was, you name a spot, he was there and had a smattering of snaps at least. And he was very effective like that. When they moved him primarily to the slot, that was when we saw the downturn. So I do think, yes, moving him back in. Will he play in the slot some? Yeah, I bet he will play in the slot some, but against certain players. And that's going to be the difference, because I think the cornerback room is better overall on the outside, that you're not forcing him to play the slot corner role. So yeah, I do think Shamari takes a step forward because he won't be forced to be playing a position that's not maybe his strong suit as much.
I agree with you. The difference between him and Sneed is a 4.37 guy, right? Especially at his size adjusted speed, he is a real burner. Shamari Conner ran a 4.5 140. So we're not talking about the same kind of athlete. Shamari Conner's a very smart player, very capable. I think you can use him as a bit of a Swiss Army knife. He's just not L'Jarius Sneed, and very few players are. That's why L'Jarius Sneed got the big contract, fetched a third rounder, which was basically a glorified second rounder for the Chiefs. First pick of the third round, and injuries kind of took their toll on L'Jarius, but he was one of the better corners in the league for a 2-year period there or so. Sticking with outside corners, which L'Jarius Sneed kind of transitioned into, likely some mix of Christian Fulton, Jalen Watson, and Noah Williams. Can those guys play well enough outside to keep Trent McDuffie inside? And I think what we both feel is this ideal slot role.
I think yes. I don't know if he's still going to play some slot though, or still going to play some outside though. Like even if there is, sub package with 3 corners on the field, and if Shamari is going to play against some guys in the slot and Trent still on the outside with either Fulton or Watson, or maybe even as the season progresses, Noah Williams. Because I was talking to Matt Derrick today. Love Matt Derrick, does great work, Chiefs Digest. And he was talking along the lines of he doesn't think that McDuff is going to be strictly your slot corner. He thinks he's still going to be getting a good amount of outside. We differed a little bit in our thoughts there, but I he's a guy I trust. I think he does great work. So I at least thought that was interesting. I just think the best configuration, if Watson and Fulton play even solid, I'm not asking for greatness. I'm asking for solidness. is McDuffie on the inside. And then if you're in a traditional 4-3, which the Chiefs aren't in as much, well, then, yeah, you'd put McDuffie on one side on the outside and Fulton or Watson on the other side. So, yeah, and maybe early in the year, we'll see, because Noah Williams probably wouldn't play a ton. You'd have to imagine early on in the season. So maybe that means more McDuffie on the outside until Noah Williams gets his footing. We'll see. But that kind of changed my viewpoint of course, McDuffie's in the slot, because it might not be that simple.
That tracks for me. If you look at Trent McDuffie, I feel totally comfortable with him shadowing like a Garrett Wilson or a Justin Jefferson, guys who just aren't going to physically tower over him. And it's weird, like Mac Hollins, because of his physical stature, is kind of like a bad matchup for Trent McDuffie. AJ Brown is like a disaster matchup for Trent McDuffie. Cortland Sutton, not a good matchup for him. Drake London, probably not a good matchup. There's an archetype of receiver like that either that really big power slot or that kind of prototypical X that, you don't want him shadowing DK Metcalf like L'Jarius Sneed was doing a few years ago. So I think he's good enough to shadow elite receivers, and they need to keep that tool in their toolbox. But I am most comfortable with him in the nickel. I think he is the best nickel, the best slot corner in the entire NFL. And you do lose maybe half a letter grade when you kick him outside. Yeah. It's not as extreme as like moving Joe Thuney to tackle, but it's the same kind of philosophy. You want to optimize guys' talent. You want them to be where they belong. Let's move along to Brian Cook here. Do you think, you mentioned just never been the same after the injury? This is the last year of his contract. Do you think there's anything more to squeeze out of Brian Cook, or is he what he is at this point?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of Juan Thornhill, which, as Adam Marshall says in the chat right there, more interested in seeing how Brian Cook looks another year removed from his injury. I am too. I feel like we've seen this story a couple times. And again, it's unfortunate. It's frustrating, more so for the player than even us. Trust me, I know it's way more frustrating for Brian than it is for us to talk about. But he looks so damn good early in his career, and then the injury, and then it hasn't been the same. And that's all it is, because I think we all know the talent's there. It's just, can he get that back? I'm rooting for him, so I hope so. But I'm not going to sit here and be like, yeah, he's going to be the guy he was, that we all thought he was when he looked like a rising star.
It was a rough year last year. I think he had his moments, but it was a little frustrating to watch a guy that you thought, like you said, was a rising star. I remember that Miami game in Berlin or Germany, wherever it was, and he had that big touchdown. He just had some real moments that season, and it just is Juan Thornhill deja vu all over again. So I'm hopeful that Dave Merritt can get him to play as good as anybody possibly can, because that's what Dave Merritt does. It's just, I don't think Brian Cook at this point is probably in the Chiefs' long-term plans. And speaking of long-term plans, these next three guys, Nazir Johnson, Roland, Wallace, I think they're going to make the roster if you look at their cap hits. Joshua Williams, I'm not so sure, because the Chiefs his dead cap is only $166,000. So that's not a huge problem for them. With those three guys, can they see the field? Do they all make the roster? Where are we at with Nazir, Roland Wallace, and Joshua Williams?
All three make the roster, no, unless they kept 11 defensive backs, which they're not. They're going to keep 10. More than likely 10. Sorry, I don't want to speak in absolutes, obviously, but more than likely 10 is going to be the max. Okay? And I don't want to bring through everything because I've already done it today multiple times. Those are the final three guys, and they would make 11. And that's not counting Deion Bush. That's counting Deion Bush in the practice squad, okay? Man, it's going to be tough for those guys. I think Nazir's on because of special teams at least. Okay? You mentioned the contract, but they're, I think, content with Nazir. Christian Roland Wallace, his chance of making the roster, I think, hinges almost completely on Shamari Conner. If Shamari's playing the slot or almost all safety. If Shamari Conner's playing predominantly slot, I don't see how Christian Roland Wallace makes it outside of practice squad. Joshua Williams, on the other hand, has not taken that step forward, has almost taken a step back. They didn't trust him at all last year, and was really bad on special teams. So I don't know. I almost feel like I can't personally give up on Joshua Williams because I just feel it. Like I'm like, come on, you have the traits, the tools. We've seen you do it. We've seen glimpses where we're like, yeah, that looks like a CB2 even. But the consistency has not been there, and it's dwindling. To me, it was the special teams lapses last year that really keep me from saying I like him on this to make the team. Right now, I guess I'd probably say the odd man out would be Williams. Again, what I would look at, though, is where is Shamari Conner playing? Because there's probably big implications for Christian Roland Wallace.
The other thing I'll mention here is if Noah Williams, if he comes in as a third-round pick and plays the part and acclimates himself quickly, I don't think we're really considering him to beat out Jalen Watson or to play ahead of Christian Fulton. I don't think the investments in Christian Fulton or Jalen Watson are enough to necessarily keep a third-round pick off the field if he comes in and shines. And Joshua Williams certainly isn't enough. Former fourth-round pick, has every trait you look for in a boundary corner, in a Dave Merritt, Steve Spagnuolo boundary corner. You know, a guy that can press bigger receivers and play quarters and do all those things. It just hasn't translated. It just hasn't materialized. Nazir Johnson, especially before he got hurt, but even now, he's one of the better. I think he's one of the better special teams like coverage guys in the entire NFL. So Dave Tobe is going to weigh in on these guys. And if he weighs in on Nazir Johnson and Joshua Williams, you know what he's going to say about those two guys. You know, we already know who he's going to pick. It's going to take a millisecond for him to make that choice. So Chris Roland Wallace, I think because of the slot utility there and wanting Shamari Conner not to have to go back there, maybe that's the guy who gets that 10th spot, but I guess we'll see. Joshua Williams, if I'm him, nicest guy in the world, great personality to have on the Chiefs, but if I'm him or a fan of his, I'm sweating bullets right now.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our next X factor, and that is tight ends not named Travis Kelce. We'll start with Noah Gray. And in the past, we've discussed what we thought, like going into last season, there was a ceiling for Noah Gray. The past 2 years, he had about 30 catches, I think 28 exactly, and about 300 yards. So that was kind of the ceiling that had settled in for Noah Gray. And then he had a year where he got 40 catches for 440 yards, more touchdowns than he's ever had. Just seemed to be on the field quite a bit more. Do you think he can raise that ceiling once again?
Yes, but not this year. I don't see the playing time necessarily being drastically raised. If anything, you could make the case that it might lower a little bit because, again, we'll talk about in a second, if Brennan Stool or Jared Wiley, some pass-catching tight ends, get some PT, well, that might cut into Gray. I don't know how much it's going to cut into Travis Kelce, especially if it's Kelce's last year. You're sitting here going, he's going to play as much as he can. If he knows it's his final season, he's going to do everything he possibly can to make sure it's a great last year. I think Noah Gray can be a back-end tight end one in the NFL. I don't have questions about that. I just don't see it happening this year because of the roster construction, quite frankly. He's a good piece. I like Noah Gray. I'm glad he's on the Chiefs. I'm excited to see what he looks like eventually in a post-Travis world, if he can actually take that next step, because I do think he's a guy who could get that 800 yards receiving. 800 yards probably is what I would say if he was like the legit tight end one on this team. I just don't see it happening this year where he's like going for 50 and 580 or something like that. I just don't quite see it.
You know what's funny to me is Isaiah Likely, right? Everyone thinks about Isaiah Likely as a future star at the tight end position, correct? Is that fair to say? I think a lot of people do. His stats, if you look at his stats last year, 42 receptions for 477 yards and 6 touchdowns. Not that dissimilar to what Noah Gray did, right? And we kind of treat, not in Kansas City, but I think a lot of people in the football community, the fantasy football community, treat Noah Gray like an afterthought. But tight ends take a while to come on. How many tight ends have we seen, whether it's, who was that guy that played for the 49ers and with Delaney Walker? Man, that guy didn't have a good football season until he was like 30 years old in terms of catching the football. He was mainly a blocker. We've seen this with David Njoku and Jonnu Smith. And time again, you have these tight ends who don't do shit until they're 28, 29, 30, because it is the most difficult position outside of quarterback to learn in the National Football League. They're asking you to be a wide receiver half the time and a tackle half the time. And sometimes the fullback too. No Gray plays some H-back. So his learning curve kind of being slow but steady, that wouldn't surprise me. If he took another step forward and put up 600 yards this year on about 50 catches, I think I would not be surprised at all. And I kind of expect that with, you mentioned Travis is going to want to play as much as possible. I also think they're going to want to spare him for the postseason, because sometimes we'd see vintage Travis Kelce come back, and then it was like the next week he looked a little sluggish, right? I think we saw some of that. So I don't think they want to see that again. The bigger question I have from a tight end perspective is Jared Wiley. We were all super excited about the athlete Jared Wiley was. The Chiefs spent significant draft capital on him. He loses his rookie season, or most of his rookie season, to an ACL injury, and he's currently not participating, at least as a full participant, in OTAs. Do you think Jared Wiley has a significant impact this season, or is this going to kind of be a second redshirt year for him?
Yeah, I think it's more of a second redshirt year. I don't think he's going to be ready for a start of regular season. I don't think so. I think we'll probably see him on the PUP list. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm, but I don't think he's ready week one. So I think it's more or less this is a year of trying to get right for the next year, which I don't hate, because I think the Chiefs have some guys, at least receiving wise, that can fill that void in that role, which we'll get to in one more second. But yeah, I feel for a while that just sucks, man. I mean, your first year and maybe even year and a half being injured, that's tough.
Yeah, it blows, man. But I'm a big proponent of the Chiefs and other teams drafting tight ends. I think they're more important than they've ever been in the history of the game. Here's the counterpoint. They develop so slowly that if they get injured, man, I mean, we may not see anything from Jared Wiley throughout the entire duration of his Chiefs contract. I could see a situation with a player like this because of the guys he's stuck behind, and now the injury coupled with the learning curve where he just does not contribute a lot in Kansas City. Then he goes somewhere else, like a Mike Gesicki or something, and he looks better, because this is just the lifespan of the tight end. And I'm with you. It kills me, but I'm just not expecting a lot when you pair the injury, his age, with the lack of opportunity in front of him. It's just going to be rough. It's going to be, and also the Chiefs have a plethora of receivers they're going to want to get on the field, especially depending on how quickly Rashee Rice reasserts himself and potential suspension looming or not looming. And then Jalen Royals, if Jalen Royals kind of follows the curve we've seen with Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice as rookies, by the time he's starting to acclimate himself and becomes a part of this offense, that's when Jared Wiley theoretically would be healthy again and looking for snaps. I just don't see the snaps being available. So if the snaps aren't available for Jared Wiley, where does that put Jake Briningstool? I was super surprised he didn't get drafted. A lot of people were very high on him as a receiving weapon coming out of Clemson. Is this a weight issue? He's 6'6", only 240 pounds. That is pretty damn light for a tight end. But a lot of people in the draft community were super high on him. Are we going to see more of Jake Briningstool than Jared Wiley this season? I guess would be my question.
I think yes. I'm somewhat in on this, actually, Jake Briningstool. At least for this year, as far as that smattering of these guys aren't going to get much PT to begin with. I mean, they might catch 12 passes this year? That's probably what we're talking about here.
Barring disaster, yes, they are going to be 13 personnel merchants. They are going to be package players that we don't see a lot of.
Yeah. So, but I think the answer is yes.
Okay, so if his role is limited and we're not going to see much of Jared Wiley, does that open the door for a Belldozer type blocking tight end to squeak on the roster? Maybe someone that isn't even around OTAs right now.
Yeah, so I would probably have him have. They probably will have 4 tight ends, probably 3 active on game day. Maybe 4, but probably 3 active on game day. So Brendan Sewell will probably be in my opinion, I think he's making. If you're asking right now, May 30th, I think he'd make the roster, but on game days he might be inactive. It leaves you Gray, Kelsey, and then probably a blocking tight end. Whether that's a Robert Tonyan, a Peyton Hendershot. I think that's important for the Chiefs. I do. I think having a blocking tight end or a block first tight end actually makes a difference. I know a lot of fans might hate it and they might not understand why. The Chiefs value that. I value that. I think that even if they're not a pass catcher at all, it doesn't matter. You need a block first tight end. Those short yarded situations, that matters. So I think, yes, it does. Because I think 4 tight ends make the 53. At least 3, maybe 4, but probably 3 active on game days. So it might be Brendan Sewell or Jared Wiley if he's healthy on the inactive list game day. But yeah, that leaves a Hendershot or a Tonyan or someone else potentially with a chance.
I don't know about Bob Tonyan, man. I think he was out of the league. I never really saw him as a pure blocking guy either. And part of the problem, I don't really know that as a problem, but the Chiefs were really loyal to the Jody Fortson project, and they stuck with that a while. And I think the sacrifice there was they weren't developing a blocking tight end, and it probably was worth the squeeze. I mean, we saw flashes of brilliance from Jody, but just the injuries, it never quite worked out. So keep your eye on that tight end room. I don't think it's fully settled yet. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
Our next X factor is edge Charles Omenihu. Okay, so 2 years ago, I thought Omenihu was a great bargain at 2 years, $16 million, about $8 million a pop, and he's performed very well when available. But between the suspension, which cost him 6 games 2 seasons ago, and the ACL injury, which took him out of the Super Bowl 2 years ago and cost him roughly half the season last year, maybe a little bit more when you're thinking, when was he really looking like himself? Guys got to get on the field, right? And I think that explains why. I mean, his contract for me, that was an eye opener to see someone of Charles Omenihu's caliber only get $4 million. But I think availability is everything, especially when people are trying to emulate the Philadelphia Eagles. They want waves of defensive linemen, and if guys can't stay healthy, you're not going to be able to send 8-9 guys after the quarterback. So he's still only 28. I think the good news about him kind of, I don't want to say getting screwed over, but kind of getting lowballed by the market at $4 million is he's going to be playing for a contract. This is a second contract year in a row for Charles Omenihu. And if you think back to what happened with Turk Wharton last year, his second year removed from the ACL injury, he really popped. So it wouldn't be surprising to me to see more athleticism from Charles Omenihu this year, more juice he's an extremely athletic guy. And I don't know, that was a very late ACL injury. That was an ACL injury that happened in the AFC Championship game against Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. He did not have that long recover. It actually was a pretty miraculous recovery when you look at the timeline. And I think it bodes well for him being full strength this year. 2 quick things before I let you take the table on Charles Omenihu. First off is defensive tackle on pass rush snaps. I think that is where he is at his peak, at his apex. He only plays there about 15% of snaps, but I think they are very useful snaps. And I think that might be part of why the Chiefs didn't do as much as expected as defensive tackle. So I do expect him to kick in alongside Chris Jones, or maybe even Chris Jones kicks out on those NASCAR packages. Where are you at with year 3 of the Charles Omenihu experience?
Yeah, I'm excited. it's a great spot for the Chiefs with Charles. You have a motivated Charles. You have a guy who's trying to prove himself. You have a guy who's shown the ability before, but has not done it for an entire season, so you got a discount. You have a guy who has positional versatility in Charles Omenihu. You have a guy that even in his own estimation played poorly last year, yet the defensive line looked completely different when he came back. It looked so much better. So not even for him. He opens up things for the other players on the defensive line. I'm really excited for Charles Omenihu. This was him and Christian Fulton were two of my favorite signings, if you will, bringing back signings if you want to view it. I am in on Charles Omenihu pretty heavily this year. I don't know about him inside as much this year. I like it, but the issue is if you put him inside, I guess you can still put Chris Jones outside and you would have Jerry Tillery or Omar Norman Lott on the inside as well. I don't know how you'd view that versus because Karlaftis is going to be there all three, right? Or does it make more sense to have Chris Jones still on the inside, Omar Norman Lott on the inside, and Charles on the outside? Because basically in that situation, all you're trying to figure out is who do you want on the inside, Charles or Chris, and which one do you want on the outside, Charles or Chris? Because I think that's probably the best. That's probably the best for pass rushers, and it's just how do you want them to line up?
With Charles Omenihu, I think it's very matchup dependent. If you have a guard that does not handle length well, and there are certainly some of them, that is when you kick him inside. So I think you'll have some games where you don't see him inside as much because you have a guard that just kind of negates what he wants to do. And then the next week, he might be inside 10 snaps because he can just bulldoze the poor bastard that just has, T-Rex arms or something and can't contend with his length and leverage. That is a tricky proposition because I think Omar Norman Lott is exclusively a pass rush guy that they're going to bring in for 15 snaps a game. Let him run wild. He has very explosive pass rusher, but at Tennessee just didn't play a lot of snaps. We'll see how ready Ashton Gelati is. What complicates this is Mike Dana is also pretty good inside. So there are only so many snaps to go around. I think my solution would be Chris Jones is 30, y'all. Let's manage his snap count a little bit. Let's make sure we get Chris Jones playing into year 32, year 33, that he's around for the long haul and we don't burn him out. I think Chris Jones played too many snaps for my liking last year for a guy of his age. And, can he do it? Yeah, but we don't need him to be Max Crosby. I want Chris Jones closing games in the fourth quarter, fresh in the fourth quarter. I don't want him missing weeks like he did last Christmas because of the calf injury. We don't want that. So, but I totally agree with you. Charles Omenihu rejuvenated that defensive line. I thought both Mike Dana and George Karlaftis, when you took a little bit of a burden off their shoulders, they both looked way better. And it's not just like anecdotally. I mean, if you look at the pass rush win rate, just the overall pressure numbers, they really went up. And George Karlaftis looked fantastic in the playoffs once Charles Omenihu was really back to being himself. So I'm really excited about that group. We'll see how it all gels. But there is one more X factor that kind of complicates things for not only that group, but the linebackers. And that is linebacker / pass rusher Leo Chenal. My question to you, I'm going to run through some numbers here and some thoughts, but is Leo Chenal, is this the year he becomes a full-time player? So quickly, he was PFF's 11th ranked linebacker last season, a little bit deceiving because he was 71st at the position in total snaps played. But he's good everywhere. He's obviously a good pass rusher and can set the edge if they want to use him like that. He was 6th against the run with a grade of 90.2. Even in coverage, which limited sample size, he had a grade of 75. Where did he get most of his snaps? Well, a lot of them were against the run or pass rushing. He had the 7th most pass rushing snaps of all linebackers. That makes him a bit of a specialist. So that's my question to you. Do we see more of Leo Chenal this year, or is this just who he is, a specialist?
This is who he is, a specialist. I've come to that conclusion And it's not a bad thing. When I say that, I don't want people to be like, oh, what a hater, or man, that's a bummer. No. He's a specialist and an incredible specialist. What he does phenomenally well. What I think Spags is doing is putting him in the best possible situation to succeed. And the fact that the Chiefs have Nick Bolton and Drew Tranquill are allowing him to not get overexposed. I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't. It'd be like Nick Bolton's not great in coverage. But if they had, let's say, the best coverage linebacker in football, well, then that might be able to allow Nick Bolton to only play on first and second downs, or obvious third down passing situations would go to that guy. The Chiefs don't really have that. Drew Tranquill's fine in pass coverage. He's pretty good, but he's not this phenomenal pass coverage linebacker, right? Leo, graded out fairly well, but I think when we watched it, we're like, okay, pass coverage, we've seen him get lost a couple times. Maybe we don't overexpose him there, so let's only give him a handful of snaps in that role. He is such a good pass rusher, run stopper, but I think the Chiefs use him almost perfectly, because I thought last year, I was in the boat of this question last year, make him a full-time player, maybe even run a legit 4-3 more often, because I think he's so athletic. Then I came to the conclusion of, all right, Spags knows more than me, obviously. Spags has him playing at his highest level, Leo, and the defense has been looking really, really good. I don't know why you'd mess it up. Yeah, I like seeing him the handful of snaps when he lines up at edge. It's pretty fun. It's exciting. Some of it, though, was necessity again with Charles Omenihu getting injured. I love Leo Chenal. I think he's a phenomenal player in that role. I'm almost nervous to see him play a full-time role and get exposed. I know it's tough because there were new pieces everywhere, but against the Broncos week 18, you saw it and go, okay, so that's why he's not playing every down, right? Now, again, different pieces. You're not playing with Nick and Drew and your normal complement of guys. So, again, big grain of salt. I guess I like where they're using Leo because it allows him to stay fresh and allows him to be an absolute game changer when they need him to be.
He brings that death row attitude when he steps on the field. And he's really useful, especially, again, matchup dependent. But when you have a defensive coordinator like Steve Spagnuolo, he's a very matchup dependent, bespoke defensive coordinator. He's going to use different players in different ways in different games. And I think that's a real net benefit to the Chiefs, because there are teams like the Buffalo Bills that don't do that as much. And I think it's to their detriment. I think the Buffalo Bills get in the playoffs, and one of the reasons they lose in the playoffs, it ain't Josh Allen, guys. Josh Allen is not the reason the Bills are losing in the playoffs. He goes toe-to-toe with Lamar and Patrick and everybody and Joe Burrow and everybody else. It's that they don't adjust. And Steve Spagnuolo is great at that. And a player like Leo Chenal is a great curveball. You play the San Francisco 49ers and you put a fifth lineman, defensive lineman down there, and you say, we're going to string you out. You're not going to shove it down our throats. It works. We saw it in the Super Bowl. Sometimes it works with the Eagles, the Ravens. I like to think of Leo Chenal if you're thinking about chess pieces. And it's weird because his relative athletic score is just mind-blowing, right? Mm-hmm. It is off the charts. But his athleticism doesn't translate diagonally, right? He's not a bishop. He's a rook. He goes side to side and straight forward. And that's it. Don't ask him to kind of drop back diagonally. He's just not coverage. Unfortunately, maybe the way they used him at Wisconsin just didn't lend itself to him being a good coverage player, because I think he came in so limited. I think what's going to happen here is the Chiefs, and I want you to weigh in here as well. The Chiefs drafted Jeffrey Bossa, right? They extended Nick Bolton. It seems like they're preparing for him to walk. Drew Tranquill is under contract again next year.
Yeah, they can get out of that, though. They'll probably get out of that contract.
I think the problem with Leo Chenal is with the way Steve Spagnuolo is using him. You said you're not smarter than Steve Spagnuolo when it comes to this shit. I know I'm not either. Some defensive coordinator is going to think he's smarter than Steve Spagnuolo and going to say, we can make Leo Chenal a guy that plays 80% of snaps, 90% of snaps. We can make him a full-time player. And, sometimes that works out. You saw what the Eagles did, right? I'm blanking on his name.
Zach Bond, but still, that was even different. They moved him from edge. I mean, he was an edge. That's the outlier, man. That is one of one. That's on Zach Bond, by the way.
It is. Leo Chanel is a pretty unique player, though. He is a very unique player. There aren't a lot of him in the league. I just think some teams are going to throw the bag at him, thinking they can get more out of him than the Chiefs are. And especially since they've already committed to Nick Bolton, I just can't see them. Man, I can't see them committing significant resources again 2 off seasons in a row. I think this is probably the swan song for Leo Chanel. One of my favorite players to watch. I mean, you think about the block kicks and everything like that. Just huge role player throughout all these Super Bowl runs. But I think this is kind of it for him. Maybe you disagree?
Yeah, I do, actually.
Okay.
I think it's like Willie Gay Jr., where he never got the contract that I think a lot of people thought he was going to get. Willie Gay. I mean, and Willie Gay Jr. probably played more snaps overall than Leo Chanel. So I don't think the market for Leo is going to be crazy. If it is, good for him. I'll be happy for him. And he gets a starting role, even happier. I just don't know what his market's going to look like. And if that's the case, I think the Chiefs will be competitive keeping him in Kansas City. I don't think Jeffrey Besa actually affects Leo at all. I think those are 2 completely different players. I think that affects Drew. I think Drew Trank will be the guy saying, that's probably my last year. I like Drew Tranquil a lot, so I'm not saying it in a good way. I'm just saying that's probably what it is, because he has a fairly large contract that 3rd year in Kansas City on the contract extension, of course. And I don't think they would keep that and Nick Bolton at the same time. That just seems like a lot of money right there. So I think what they'll say is, all right, we appreciate Drew. We have Jeffrey on a rookie contract, but freeing up the Drew Tranquil contract allows us to give a little money to keep Leo, who's also incredibly good on special teams. That maybe allows you to get out of Jack Conkrin's contract, which people don't really bring up. Jack Conkrin's making a lot of money for a special teamer, like special team only almost, right? That's a good chunk of money. That's probably how they try and justify finding the funds for Leo. That's how I would do it, probably, is saying, hey, all right, Leo's going to continue doing his role. He'll fill over the Jack Conkrin special team ace role. We'll still take some of the money from Drew, allocate it to Leo. That way we can still have him for the handful of snaps, 20 snaps a game that we love him on the field for. And now he's a major core special teamer, even more so than he already is. Because then you can probably have Cam Jones on a cheaper deal than Jack Conkrin, or Jack Conkrin comes back on a much cheaper free agent deal. Again, Jack Conkrin's not making a ton of money, but for a special teamer, him and Nazir are both making a decent chunk.
It all more human than human, right? And also film director, Rob Zombie.
Yes, film director. Little Rob Zombie action.
More human than human, right? And also film director. Community grow. First off, subscribe here on YouTube. That community grow. First off, Kingdom, they will be on top of it. So if you want to stay in the know, if you want to be at the cookout this summer, if you want to be the Chiefs fan who knows what they're talking about, arrowheadaddict.com. This is the way.